There's a silent battle that almost no one talks about on the spiritual path, a struggle that happens in the shadows of consciousness, something that makes deeply awakened people feel confused, ashamed, even hypocritical. Eckhart Tolle addressed this topic directly, and what he revealed explains why you might be experiencing one of the most intense conflicts of your awakening journey. Have you ever noticed that the more your awareness expands, the more intense certain urges seem to become? You expected that awakening would bring total peace, absolute control, transcendence of all desires, but instead you find yourself in an internal war that no one prepared you to face, and it makes you question if you're really evolving or if you're regressing. Today, I'm going to explain why this happens. Why spiritually awakened people often struggle against sexual urges more intensely than people who have never questioned the nature of reality. And more importantly, I'll reveal what Tolle teaches about how to transform this struggle into one of the most powerful paths to enlightenment. But first, we need to understand something fundamental that most spiritual teachings fail to explain clearly. Tolle teaches that while the ego commands your life, most of your thoughts, emotions, and actions arise from desire and fear. This is crucial. Desire isn't something separate from the ego. Desire is one of the main ways through which the ego manifests and stays alive. And sexual desire is perhaps the most powerful expression of this dynamic. The ego has a constant sense of lack, of incompleteness, that something is missing. This feeling of emptiness creates an intense desire for external things to fill that hole. Possessions, success, power, recognition, and relationships, especially physical and sexual relationships. The ego falsely believes that temporary pleasures can make you feel complete, that union with another body can resolve the fundamental separation it feels. When we identify with the mind, we identify with these desires and longings. We seek fulfillment and happiness through the acquisition of these things. But although they may momentarily satisfy the desire, satisfying a desire will never bring true peace and enlightenment. And here's the paradox that few understand. When you start to awaken, when your awareness expands, you become more aware of these desires, more aware of the mechanics of the ego. And this increased awareness can initially intensify the experience of desire, not diminish it. Because now you're observing something that previously operated completely on autopilot. This leads us to the first crucial insight that Tolle offers on this topic. The sexual urge itself isn't the problem. The problem is the unconsciousness that normally accompanies that urge. Tolle explains that the key is to bring awareness to something that would normally make you unconscious. He talks about becoming the observer at any stage when sexual impulses arise, bringing awareness to them without necessarily acting on them, feeling and perceiving, and being the awareness for it. This is revolutionary. He's not saying to repress. He's not saying to suppress. He's not saying to deny. He's saying to observe with full awareness. And this conscious observation completely changes the nature of the experience. When you bring presence to the sensory perceptions, awareness arises even while the impulse is there. Meeting the impulse with awareness is, in Tolle's words, a beautiful spiritual practice. It's not a failure. It's not an obstacle, it's an opportunity. But why does this struggle seem so intense for spiritually awakened people? Why does it seem more difficult than it was before? The answer lies in the nature of the energy we call sexual. In Eastern traditions, especially in yoga and tantra, there's a concept called kundalini. It's an energy coiled at the base of the spine that, when released, rises through the energy centers of the body to reach the top of the head. resulting in spiritual awakening. Academic research published on this phenomenon suggests that Kundalini-type experiences are related to a sudden release of energy, normally expressed as sexual energy or libido. The concept of Kundalini awakening may have been developed as a way to describe the transformational experience of a sudden release of concentrated sexual energy. This means something profound. Sexual energy and spiritual energy are not separate things. They're the same life force, expressed in different ways. Kundalini and sexual energy are two aspects of the same life force. While Kundalini resides in the root chakra, sexual energy is more active in the sacral chakra. Together, they form the basis of our vitality and creative power. When you start to awaken spiritually, this energy starts to move, starts to activate, and naturally, it may manifest first in the forms you know best, which are the sexual forms. Experiencing intense sexual desire during Kundalini awakening is a manifestation of the primordial life force seeking expression. This potent energy, fundamental to our existence, goes beyond physical arousal. It represents the essence of creation and creativity, pushing against our limits to find expression. Remember when I talked about how expanded awareness can initially intensify the experience of desire? Now you understand the mechanism behind it. The energy that was sleeping is awakening. It's like water accumulated behind a dam. When you open the gates of consciousness, the water flows with force. But here's the crucial point that separates transformation from suffering. The ascension of Kundalini is often accompanied by an awakening of sexual energy. This happens because sexual energy serves as fuel for the ascension of Kundalini. However, the journey isn't about indulging in physical desires. It's about transforming and directing that energy for spiritual purposes. This is the key that most people miss. It's not about suppressing. It's not about blindly indulging. It's about transforming, directing, channeling. Tolle addresses this in a practical and accessible way. He doesn't necessarily use the language of Kundalini, but the principle is the same. Bringing presence to the impulse is the first step, observing without reacting automatically. And from this conscious observation, the energy has space to transform naturally. This leads us to a practical question. How exactly do you do this when you're in the middle of an intense impulse? Tolle suggests a powerful technique. If you're feeling the impulse, bring awareness to the physical sensations. Where in the body do you feel it? What's the quality of the sensation? Is it hot? Is it vibrant? Where does it begin? Where does it end? Observe it as if you're a scientist, studying a fascinating phenomenon. Do not judge it, do not label it as good or bad, just observe. When you do that, something extraordinary happens. The energy that was completely identified with the desire for external gratification begins to move differently. The urgency diminishes, clarity increases, and you have the freedom to choose consciously how to respond, instead of being automatically dragged along by the compulsion. But there's a deeper level here that we need to explore. Why exactly does the ego use sexual desire so intensely? Eckhart Tolle teaches that if, in your relationships, you experience as much love as you do the opposite of love, attack, emotional violence, and so on, then it's likely you're confusing egoic attachment and addictive clinging with love. You can't love your partner one moment and attack them the next. True love has no opposite. If your love has an opposite, then it's not love, but a strong egoic need for a deeper, more complete sense of self, a need that the other person temporarily satisfies. It's the ego's substitute for salvation. This is revealing. The ego seeks completeness through sexual union because it unconsciously believes that it will resolve its fundamental sense of separation. It will fill the void. It will bring the peace it so desperately seeks. But because this search comes from the ego, from a place of lack, it can never truly satisfy. It might bring temporary relief, momentary pleasure, but soon the emptiness returns, and with it, the desire. Spiritually awakened people feel this conflict more intensely because they're starting to see through the illusion. They're starting to realize that the satisfaction they seek can't come from outside. But the ego is still present, still operating, still seeking to fill the void in the only way it knows how. It's a struggle between two parts of you. The part that is awakening and knows that peace comes from within, and the egoic part that still believes completeness comes from without, especially through physical connection with another body. This tension can be extremely uncomfortable. It can make you feel divided, hypocritical, fake. But Tolle offers a transformative perspective on this. Pursuing desires is one of the ways the ego maintains its sense of being real. There's always a sense of hope and fear that accompanies the ego's desires, and it can be recognized through emotional attachment to what it wants and the pain of not getting it. When you recognize this, when you see clearly this mechanism operating, you're no longer completely identified with it. The awareness that observes is not the ego, it's something deeper. Something that doesn't need external gratification to be at peace. This leads us to the question many ask: is celibacy necessary for spiritual growth? Tolle doesn't prescribe celibacy as a requirement, but he offers a balanced perspective. The whole dimension of spirituality is growing beyond the physical. If your involvement with the physical is very deep, naturally your attachment to the body is very strong. It's not sex itself that can be an impediment to someone's growth, but the attachment to the body definitely is. Generally, sexuality cultivates this attachment, which is the context in which celibacy has been discussed in spiritual traditions. So it's not about sex being bad or wrong, it's about the awareness with which you relate to the experience. It's about the level of attachment and identification. You can have an active sex life and still grow spiritually. As long as you bring awareness to that area of your life, instead of operating on autopilot, some practitioners choose celibacy as a way to conserve and redirect energy. Research on Eastern traditions shows that the logic behind celibacy is that if you conserve vital life force and divert it to spiritual processes like contemplation, philosophical study, reflection, and meditation, these practices become more successful because you've concentrated your strength. But others argue that forced abstinence or celibacy harms spiritual growth. Spiritual awakening isn't related only to celibacy. It happens when you become aware and meditative, independent of the situations. Tolle seems to agree more with this second perspective. The focus isn't on external behavior, but on the quality of internal consciousness. You can be celibate and completely identified with the ego, full of repression and denial. Or you can be sexually active and deeply present, conscious, detached from the outcome. The key is always the same: presence, awareness, observation without identification. Going back to the conflict that awakened people experience. Now you understand that this conflict is actually a sign of progress, not of failure. You're feeling the tension because there's enough awareness to perceive what was previously completely automatic. The struggle is an indicator that something is changing, something is transforming. But how do you navigate this transformation practically? How do you work with this energy without getting lost in it or repressing it? Tolle offers an approach that's both practical and profound. First, Recognize that the impulse is not you. You are not the desire. You are the awareness that observes the desire arise. This distinction is fundamental. When you know you aren't the impulse, you have freedom. You can choose how to respond instead of reacting automatically. Second, bring the sensation into the present. Sexual desire almost always involves fantasy, projection into the future, mental images. When you bring attention to the pure physical sensations, without the mental story, without the fantasy, the experience changes dramatically. The urgency diminishes. The energy becomes more subtle, more refined. Third, allow the energy to move. Do not repress it. Do not force it. Simply observe with loving curiosity. The energy that was trapped in the form of sexual desire can naturally begin to rise, to transform, to express itself in more subtle ways. Creativity, inspiration, expansion of awareness. And here's something that few teachings mention. This transformed energy doesn't disappear. It becomes available for other purposes. Many artists, scientists, mystics throughout history have reported periods of intense creativity after consciously working with sexual energy. The energy is the same. It's just found a different channel of expression. Before we continue, I want to pause. This is a sensitive topic, a topic that most spiritual channels avoid because it's uncomfortable, because it breaks the image that awakened people are beings of pure light, without human impulses. If you're watching this far, it's probably because this topic resonates with your real experience. This channel exists to bring you truths that transform, even when they're uncomfortable. If you recognize the value in that, if this content is helping you understand and navigate your own spiritual journey, then super thanks is one way to support the continuation of this work. It's not payment, it's recognition. It's you saying that truth matters more than comfort. Now let me give you a specific practice that you can apply starting today. When a sexual urge arises, instead of immediately seeking satisfaction, or instead of trying to suppress it, do the following. Stop. Close your eyes if possible. Bring all your attention to the physical sensation in your body. Where do you feel it? What's the quality of it? Breathe deeply a few times, directing your attention to the sensation. Now, mentally, invite the energy to rise. Don't force it. Just invite it. Imagine the energy moving from your pelvic region to your abdomen, then to your chest, then to your throat, to your head. Breathe as you do this. Keep your attention on the sensation as it moves and transforms. The signs that it's working are subtle but clear. The urgency of the impulse diminishes. A sense of expansion might arise. Mental clarity, sometimes a feeling of joy or peace. That doesn't depend on external satisfaction. With practice, this process becomes natural, and you discover that you possess a source of energy and vitality that doesn't depend on anything external. The most profound thing of all is this. When you stop seeking completeness through another body, through sexual gratification, you discover something extraordinary. The completeness you were seeking was already there. It always was. It was just obscured by the constant searching, by the incessant movement towards something outside of yourself. Eckhart Tolle teaches that when you're no longer totally identified with forms, awareness, who you really are, you liberate yourself from your prison in form. This freedom arises as stillness, a subtle, deep peace within you. And it's from this peace, from this already present completeness, that true relationships can emerge. Not relationships based on need, on lack, on trying to fill a void, but relationships based on abundance, on sharing, on celebration. It's a beautiful paradox. When you stop needing the other person to feel complete, you can finally love for real. When you stop using sex as an escape from the feeling of separation, you can experience true intimacy. When sexual energy is no longer a master you serve compulsively, it becomes a tool you can use consciously. The struggle you feel is not failure, it's transformation in progress. It's the caterpillar in the cocoon, dissolving to become a butterfly. Uncomfortable? Yes. Confusing? Sometimes, but absolutely necessary for what is being born in you. There's one more dimension of this topic that I need to address before wrapping up. Something that's rarely discussed, but that's crucial for completely understanding this dynamic. Many spiritually awakened people experience periods of intensified sexual desire, followed by periods of complete absence of desire. This can be confusing and disconcerting. One day you feel you've completely transcended this need. The next day, the desire returns with full force. This oscillation isn't failure, it's part of the process. What's happening is that the energy is reorganizing. The system is finding a new equilibrium. The old pattern of seeking external gratification is dissolving, but the new pattern of internal completeness hasn't fully established itself yet. And it's in that space, between the old and the new, that the oscillation happens. Tolle reminds us that the ego uses resistance to stay alive. If you resist the periods of intense desire, you strengthen the ego through that resistance. If you resist the periods of absence of desire, thinking that you should feel something, you equally strengthen the ego. The key is to not resist either state. Observe both with equanimity. Let them come, let them go, without clinging, without rejecting. This requires a spiritual maturity that develops over time. It's not something you conquer all at once. It's a gradual process of learning to be the awareness that observes, independent of the content that appears in awareness. Intense desire arises, observe. Complete absence of desire arises, observe. The awareness that observes remains the same, unshaken, at peace. A metaphor that Tolle frequently uses helps to understand this. He compares consciousness to the sky, and thoughts and emotions to the clouds. Clouds come and go. Some are dark and stormy, others are light and fleeting. But the sky remains always there, immutable, vast, welcoming all the clouds without being affected by any of them. Your job is to identify with the sky, not with the clouds. Desire is a cloud. The absence of desire is also a cloud. You are the sky that observes both passing by. It's also important to recognize that each person has their own time and process. Some people naturally move towards less interest in sexuality as they awaken. Others maintain an active sex life, but with a completely different quality. More present, more conscious, less compulsive. There is no one right path for everyone. What Eckhart Tolle consistently emphasizes is the quality of consciousness, not the external behavior. You can appear spiritually elevated on the outside, practicing rigorous celibacy, but be full of repression and denied desire on the inside. Or you can have an active sex life and be completely at peace, present, free from compulsion. The exterior doesn't determine the interior. Appearance doesn't determine essence. This understanding frees you from judgment, frees you from comparing your process with that of others, frees you from expectations of how you should be at this stage of your journey. Each of us is where we are, and it's from where we are that the next step reveals itself. Tolle also mentions something important about the difference between men and women in this context. He observes in The Power of Now that women are generally closer to awakening than men, because they are less trapped in their minds. This suggests that the experience of this conflict between spirituality and sexuality can be different for men and women. Men might experience this more as a mental battle, a struggle between thoughts and impulses. Women might experience it more as an emotional tension, a conflict of feelings. Regardless of gender, the principle remains the same. Bring awareness, observe without judging, allow the energy to transform naturally through presence. And here's something deeply comforting. This struggle that you feel means that you are awakening. If you were completely asleep, completely unconscious, you would simply follow the impulses without questioning. You wouldn't feel that conflict because there wouldn't be enough awareness to even perceive that there's something beyond immediate gratification. The very fact that you're here. Watching this, seeking to understand, trying to navigate this complex territory is proof that your awareness is expanding. You are on the precipice of something greater. The discomfort you feel is the discomfort of growth, of expansion, of transformation. And at some point, maybe gradually, maybe suddenly, you'll realize the struggle is over. Not because you conquered desire through sheer willpower, but because desire has lost its power over you. Because you've discovered within yourself what desire promised but could never deliver: completeness, peace, fullness. And from that place of completeness, you can choose freely, not compulsively, not out of need, but by conscious choice. And that changes everything. Eckhart Tolle reminds us that the present moment is the only exit point from the ego. The ego cannot coexist with presence. The ego only lives in the past and the future. When you are completely present with the sexual energy, without the mental story, without the fantasy of the future, without the memory of the past, you are in that moment free from the ego. And in that freedom, the energy transforms naturally. Not because you forced it, but because presence is transformation. The Buddha taught that pain and suffering come from desire and craving. Desires and cravings keep our focus on the future. Once I achieve this, I will be happy. That mentality keeps us out of the present moment, which is the only place to find true peace and enlightenment. Tolle echoes this teaching in a way that's accessible for the modern world. Now, I need to hear from you. Have you ever experienced this conflict between spiritual growth and physical urges? How have you navigated it? Do you recognize the oscillations I've described? Comment down below. This is a safe space to share real experiences without judgment. And your honesty can help others who are going through the same transformation in silence, thinking they're the only ones. I read and respond to every comment in the first 2 hours.